My house was robbed and they took everything I had. When I asked my son for help, he told me, "My girlfriend said she doesn't want a mummy like you here. Leave." So I called an old police lieutenant, who was my godfather.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
When he showed up, she turned pale. But let me start from the beginning, because the real story is so much worse than those simple words can convey. The morning I discovered the break-in, I stood in my living room doorway, unable to move. 43 years of marriage memories scattered across the hardwood floors like broken dreams. The antique jewelry box my husband Harold gave me for our first anniversary, gone. The silver tea set we received as a wedding gift, vanished. Even the family photos had been torn from their frames, as if someone wanted to erase not just my possessions, but my entire history. I was 65 years old, living alone since Harold passed 2 years ago, surviving on his modest pension and Social Security. The thieves had taken everything of value, including the emergency cash I kept hidden in the bedroom dresser. Standing there in that violated space, I felt smaller than I ever had in my entire life. My hands shook as I called 911. The officer who responded was kind but realistic. "Ma'am, without serial numbers or distinctive markings, most of this stuff is gone for good. You might want to contact your insurance company and think about staying somewhere else tonight." Sometimes these guys come back. Somewhere else? I had nowhere else to go. That's when I called Robert, my only child. My son who used to bring me wildflowers when he was 5, who would climb into my lap during thunderstorms, who promised at his father's funeral that he would always take care of me. "Mom?" His voice sounded distracted when he answered. I could hear music in the background, laughter that didn't include me. "Robert, honey, something terrible happened. The house was broken into. They took everything." My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay composed. "I don't have anywhere to go tonight." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. When he finally spoke, his tone had changed. Cooler, more distant. "Hold on, Mom." I heard muffled voices, his hand covering the phone. Then Amanda's voice, clear and sharp. "Tell her we don't have room for charity cases right now." When Robert came back on the line, he sounded like a stranger. "Mom, this really isn't a good time. Amanda's been planning this dinner party for weeks, and we have guests coming. Maybe you could call one of your church friends?" Church friends, as if I were some distant acquaintance instead of the woman who gave birth to him, who raised him alone for 3 years when his father was deployed overseas, who worked 2 jobs to pay for his college education. "Robert, I'm your mother. I don't have anyone else." Another pause. More muffled conversation. Then words that would echo in my head for weeks afterward. "My girlfriend said she doesn't want a mummy like you here. You need to figure this out yourself." Mummy, like I was some ancient, decrepit thing wrapped in bandages instead of his flesh and blood. The line went dead. I sat on my violated couch, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and cried for the first time since Harold's funeral. Not just for the stolen belongings, but for the son I had apparently lost somewhere along the way. That night, I stayed in a cheap motel that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. The clerk, a tired-looking woman about my age, gave me a discount when I explained my situation. "Rooms paid through tomorrow night, honey. After that, you'll need to figure something out." Figure something out. Everyone expected me to have answers I didn't possess. The next morning, I drove to Robert's house. I had been there dozens of times since he started dating Amanda 8 months ago, but I had never really looked at it through her eyes. The perfectly manicured lawn, the expensive cars in the driveway, the house that screamed success and stability, everything I no longer represented. Amanda answered the door wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, not a strand out of place even at 8 in the morning. "Linda." She didn't invite me in. Robert's already left for work. I was hoping we could talk. Woman to woman. Her laugh was like ice cubes clinking in an empty glass. About what? About last night. About Robert. About family. Family. She repeated the word like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "Let me be clear about something, Linda. Robert is building a future with me. A real future. Not one weighed down by the past or by people who can't take care of themselves. The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This wasn't just dislike, it was active contempt. I raised that boy, I said quietly. I sacrificed everything for him, and that's your mistake right there. Amanda stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. You think sacrifice creates obligation. It doesn't. It just creates resentment. Robert doesn't owe you anything just because you chose to have a child you couldn't afford. Each word hit like a physical blow. That's not how family works. That's exactly how family works. The strong survive, the weak get left behind. And right now, Linda, you're dead weight. She started to close the door, then paused. Oh, and don't bother coming by when Robert's home. I've explained to him how stressful these visits are for me, especially in my condition. Your condition? Amanda's smile was triumphant. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby in 6 months. Robert's real family is just beginning. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Amanda wasn't just rejecting me. She was systematically erasing me from my son's life. And somehow she had convinced Robert that this was not only acceptable, but necessary. That's when I remembered Charles. Charles Morrison had been my godfather since I was 7 years old, chosen by my parents because he was Harold's best friend and the most honorable man they knew. He had walked me down the aisle when my father was too ill to do it. He had been a pallbearer at Harold's funeral. He had promised Harold on his deathbed that he would watch over me. Charles had been a police lieutenant for 35 years before retiring. If anyone could help me understand what was happening to my life, what was happening to my son, it would be him. As I drove away from Robert's house, I made the call that would change everything. Charles, it's Linda. I need your help. Charles arrived at my motel room within an hour of my call. At 72, he still carried himself like the cop he had been for most of his adult life. Straight shoulders, alert eyes that missed nothing, and a presence that made you feel safer just by being there. When he wrapped me in a bear hug, I finally felt like someone cared about what happened to me. Tell me everything, he said, settling into the room's single chair while I sat on the edge of the bed. So I did. I told him about the robbery, about Robert's rejection, about Amanda's cruel words. I told him about feeling invisible in my own son's life, about watching him change into someone I didn't recognize. Charles listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked a question that surprised me. How long has Robert been with this Amanda? 8 months. Why? And when did you start feeling like he was pulling away from you? I thought about it carefully. About 8 months ago. Charles nodded grimly. Linda, in 35 years of police work, I've seen this pattern before. What you're describing isn't normal relationship adjustment. This sounds like systematic isolation. What do you mean? He leaned forward, his voice gentle but serious. Manipulative people don't just control their partners. They control their partner's entire world. They cut off family relationships, friendships, support systems. They make their victim dependent on them for everything. Emotional support, social connection, even basic decision-making. My chest felt tight. You think that's what Amanda is doing to Robert? I think it's possible. Tell me, has Robert made any other changes since he started dating her? The floodgates opened. Now that Charles had given me a framework to understand what I was seeing, the pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. He stopped calling me every Sunday. We used to talk for an hour every week, but Amanda said Sunday was their couple time. Then he stopped coming to our traditional family dinners. Amanda said she was teaching him to eat healthier foods. I paused, remembering more details that had seemed insignificant at the time. His college friends stopped coming around. He said Amanda found them immature. His co-workers stopped getting invited to things. He said Amanda preferred a smaller social circle. Even his hobbies changed. He gave up golf because Amanda said it was boring, stopped reading mystery novels because she said they were violent. Charles was taking notes now, his expression growing darker. What about his appearance? His behavior? He dresses differently now. More expensive clothes, but styles Amanda picks out. He talks differently too, uses words and phrases that sound like her, and he's always asking for her opinion about everything, even things he used to decide himself. How is he financially? I don't know exactly, but he seems stressed about money lately. He used to be so responsible with his finances, but now he's always talking about expensive trips Amanda wants to take, renovations she's planning for the house. He even took a second mortgage last month. Charles set down his pen and looked at me seriously. Linda, what I'm hearing suggests your son might be in an emotionally abusive relationship. The isolation, the financial control, the changes in personality. These are classic warning signs. The words hit me like a physical blow. My strong, independent son, abused? It seemed impossible. But Charles, she's pregnant. He seems happy about the baby. That makes it worse, not better. A pregnancy gives her permanent leverage over him. Even if he realizes what's happening and tries to leave, she'll have that child to use as a weapon. I felt sick. What kind of woman does that to someone? The kind who sees people as objects to be used rather than human beings to be loved. And Linda, if she's willing to systematically destroy Robert's relationship with his own mother, what do you think she'll do if you become more of a threat to her control? The implication chilled me. You think I'm in danger? I think anyone who threatens her power over Robert is in danger. And right now, you're the biggest threat she faces. You knew Robert before she did. You love him unconditionally. You represent everything she's trying to make him forget about himself. We sat in silence for a moment while I processed this information. Then Charles asked another question that surprised me. Tell me about the robbery again. Walk me through exactly what was taken. I described the missing items again, the jewelry, the silver, the cash, the electronics. Charles made notes, asking specific questions about timing, entry points, what was left behind. Linda, do you have any reason to believe Amanda knows where you keep your valuables? Has she been in your house recently? I thought about it. She came to dinner 3 weeks ago. She used the bathroom upstairs, said she was feeling sick. She was up there for quite a while, actually. Long enough to look around your bedroom? The possibility had never occurred to me. You don't think? I don't know what to think yet, but I'm going to find out. Charles stood up, suddenly looking every inch the experienced detective he had been. Linda, I want you to stay away from Robert's house for now. Don't call him. Don't try to visit. Let me do some digging first. What kind of digging? The kind I should have done 8 months ago when you first mentioned this, Amanda. I let my guard down because I thought you were just adjusting to Robert having a serious girlfriend. I should have paid closer attention. The guilt in his voice was unmistakable. Charles had always taken his promise to Harold seriously. Too seriously, maybe. He had watched over me like a protective father for 2 years, and now he felt like he had failed. This isn't your fault, Charles. Maybe not, but fixing it is my responsibility. He handed me a business card with his personal cell phone number. Call me if anything happens. Anything at all. Don't try to handle Amanda alone. After he left, I sat in that dingy motel room thinking about everything he had said. Was it possible that my son's rejection wasn't really about me at all? That Robert wasn't the cold, selfish person he had seemed like on the phone, but a victim himself? The thought was both hopeful and terrifying. Hopeful because it meant the son I raised might still exist underneath Amanda's influence. Terrifying because if Charles was right, then Robert was trapped with someone who saw him as property rather than a person. And if Amanda was capable of systematically destroying a mother-son relationship that had lasted 43 years, what else was she capable of? That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the motel made me jump. Every car door slamming in the parking lot made me wonder if someone was coming for me. Charles's words echoed in my head. Anyone who threatens her power over Robert is in danger. I had never thought of myself as threatening to anyone. I was 65 years old, recently widowed, living on a fixed income. What kind of threat could I possibly pose? But as I lay there in the darkness, listening to the traffic outside and the murmur of voices from neighboring rooms, I began to understand. I wasn't threatening because I was powerful. I was threatening because I remembered who Robert used to be before Amanda got her claws into him. I remembered the little boy who brought me dandelions and called them roses. I remembered the teenager who spent his weekends helping me with yard work instead of hanging out with friends. I remembered the young man who called me every day during his father's final illness, who held my hand at the funeral, who promised he would never let me face the world alone, that Robert still existed somewhere underneath Amanda's manipulation, and she knew that as long as I was around to remind him of who he used to be, her control over him would never be complete. The next morning, Charles called with news that changed everything. "Linda, I've been making some inquiries about your Amanda. There are some things you need to know." The tone of his voice made my blood run cold. Charles picked me up from the motel at 9 in the morning, looking like a man who hadn't slept much either. His usually neat appearance was slightly rumpled, and there was an intensity in his eyes that I recognized from the old days when he was working a difficult case. "We're going to breakfast," he said as I got into his car. "Somewhere we can talk privately." He drove to a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where cops used to meet for coffee during shift changes. We settled into a corner booth where Charles could sit with his back to the wall and watch the door, old habits from decades of police work. "Tell me what you found," I said after we ordered. Charles pulled out a small notebook, the same kind he used to carry when he was investigating cases. "Amanda Richardson, 28 years old, originally from Phoenix, Arizona, moved here 10 months ago, a month before she met Robert." "What was she doing in Phoenix?" "That's where it gets interesting. She worked as a home health aide for elderly patients, specifically wealthy elderly patients." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "And 3 of her former clients died while she was caring for them. All left her significant amounts of money in their wills." The words hit me like ice water. "You think she—" "I don't know what to think yet. 2 of the deaths were ruled natural causes, heart attacks in patients with existing cardiac problems. The 3rd was ruled accidental, a fall down the stairs. But you're suspicious." Charles nodded grimly. "In 35 years of police work, you develop instincts about patterns. 3 wealthy elderly clients, all dead within 6 months of hiring the same caregiver, all leaving her money. It could be coincidence, but you don't believe in coincidences. Not when this much money is involved. The first client left her $50,000, the second, $75,000. The third left her nearly $200,000. I felt dizzy. That's over $300,000. Which explains how a 28-year-old home health aide could afford to move to an expensive city like ours and immediately start dating a man with Robert's income level. She had seed money. The implications were staggering. If Charles's suspicions were correct, Amanda wasn't just a manipulative girlfriend. She was potentially something much more dangerous. "Did you contact the Phoenix police?" I made some informal inquiries. The detective who worked the last case, the fall down the stairs, retired last year, but he's willing to talk to us. He never liked how that investigation closed. Charles leaned across the table, his voice dropping. "Linda, there's more. I did some checking on Amanda's background here in town. She's been very busy these past 10 months. "What do you mean?" "She's been volunteering at 3 different senior centers, always with the same demographic, wealthy widowed men between 60 and 80 years old." My blood ran cold. "You think she was looking for her next target? I think she found one in Robert. Think about it, Linda. Your son is financially stable, emotionally vulnerable after losing his father, and he has a mother who might inherit property someday. From her perspective, he's perfect. But Robert isn't elderly. No, but he's isolated now, financially stressed from supporting her expensive lifestyle, and emotionally dependent on her approval for everything. She's turned him into the equivalent of one of those elderly clients, someone who can be controlled and manipulated until she's ready to move on. The cruelty of it took my breath away. And the pregnancy? Insurance policy. If Robert starts to wake up, she has a permanent connection to him and his family's resources. I pushed my breakfast away, too sick to eat. "Charles, what if you're wrong? What if she really does love Robert and is just protective of their relationship? Then I'll apologize and mind my own business. But Linda, look at the pattern of behavior. She isolated him from his friends and family. She changed his appearance, his hobbies, his entire personality. She convinced him to take out a second mortgage on his house. She's financially and emotionally controlling him. He paused, studying my face. And when his mother, the one person who knew him before Amanda came along, needed help after a traumatic robbery, she made sure Robert rejected you. That's not love, Linda. That's possession. We sat in silence while I processed everything he had told me. Finally, I asked the question I was afraid to hear answered. What do we do now? Now I start investigating this properly. I want to talk to the detective in Phoenix. I want to look into Amanda's activities since she's been here, and I want to keep you safe while I'm doing it. Safe from what? Charles's expression was grim. Linda, if my suspicions are correct, you represent a threat to a very dangerous woman. You're the one person who could potentially wake Robert up to what's happening to him. And if Amanda has done what I think she's done to those elderly clients in Phoenix. He didn't need to finish the sentence. If Amanda was capable of murder, then anyone who threatened her control over Robert was potentially in danger. I can't keep staying in that motel forever. You're not going to. You're coming to stay with me and Margaret until we figure this out. Margaret was Charles's wife of 48 years. I had known her almost as long as I had known Charles, and she had always been like a second mother to me. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. You're family, and family protects family. The simple truth of those words made tears spring to my eyes. Here was Charles, treating me like family should treat family, while my own son had turned his back on me because his girlfriend found me inconvenient. There's something else, Charles said, pulling out his phone. I want to show you something. He scrolled through his photos and showed me a screenshot of a social media post. It was Amanda, smiling at the camera, her arm around a man I didn't recognize. The caption read, "So grateful for my amazing fiancé David. Can't wait to start our life together." When was this posted? 6 weeks ago. Oh, my hands started shaking. 6 weeks ago, she was already with Robert. Gets worse. Look at this one. Another photo. This one from 3 months ago. Amanda with a different man, older this time, with the caption, "My wonderful boyfriend Michael treats me like a queen. Some girls have all the luck." I stared at the photos, my mind reeling. She's been dating multiple men at the same time? It appears so. And notice something about both these men. They're both in their 40s. Both appear to be financially successful. Both look like they're completely devoted to her. The pattern was becoming clear. Amanda wasn't just manipulating Robert. She was running some kind of sophisticated long-term con, juggling multiple relationships with men she saw as resources rather than human beings. Does Robert know about this? I doubt it. She's been very careful to keep her different lives separate. But Linda, this changes everything. We're not just dealing with a manipulative girlfriend anymore. We're dealing with someone who's potentially committed fraud, theft, and possibly even murder. Charles put his phone away and leaned back in the booth. I'm going to contact a few people I know who are still on the force. We need to start building a case. A case for what? Fraud, at minimum. If she's been conning multiple men simultaneously, that's criminal behavior. And if my suspicions about Phoenix are correct, we might be looking at something much more serious. As we left the diner, I felt a strange mixture of hope and terror. Hope because Charles was taking action, because I finally understood what was happening to Robert, because there might be a way to save my son from whatever trap Amanda had set for him. Terror, because if Charles was right about Amanda's past, then Robert wasn't just being manipulated. He was potentially in real physical danger. And so was I. That afternoon, Charles made phone calls while I sat in his living room with Margaret, trying to process everything I had learned. Margaret brought me tea and homemade cookies, treating me with the gentle kindness that comes from 48 years of marriage to a cop who has seen the worst of human nature. Charles told me about Robert, she said softly. I'm so sorry, dear. I feel so stupid for not seeing it sooner. Don't blame yourself. These people are experts at what they do. They know exactly how to manipulate their targets and everyone around them. Margaret sat down beside me on the couch. When Charles was still on the force, we saw this kind of thing more than you'd think. Usually it was elderly people being taken advantage of by caregivers or supposed romantic partners, but the pattern is always the same: isolation, financial control, emotional manipulation. How does it usually end? Margaret was quiet for a moment. Sometimes the victim realizes what's happening and gets help. Sometimes law enforcement intervenes, but sometimes she trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. Sometimes people die. Sometimes people die. That evening, Charles came home with news that made my blood run cold. I talked to Detective Morrison in Phoenix. No relation, just coincidence. He's agreed to share the case files with me unofficially. What did he say? Charles sat down heavily in his recliner, suddenly looking every one of his 72 years. Linda, I think we're dealing with someone much more dangerous than I originally thought. How dangerous? The third client? The one who supposedly fell down the stairs? Detective Morrison never believed it was an accident. The crime scene didn't match the story Amanda told. There were inconsistencies in her timeline, and the victim had defensive wounds that suggested a struggle. My hands went numb. But they couldn't prove anything. Not enough to prosecute, but Morrison kept investigating on his own time after he retired. He's been tracking Amanda's movements since she left Phoenix. And? Charles looked at me with eyes that had seen too much human cruelty. Linda, according to Morrison's research, Robert isn't the only man Amanda's been involved with since she moved here, and one of her other boyfriends, a man named David Peterson, disappeared 3 weeks ago. The room spun around me. Disappeared? His car was found at the bottom of Miller's Creek with his body inside. Ruled a suicide by the local sheriff's department. I couldn't breathe. You think Amanda. I think Amanda Richardson has been killing people for money for years. And I think my godson might be next. The next morning, Charles left early to drive to Phoenix to meet with retired Detective Morrison in person. I spent the day pacing Margaret's living room, unable to concentrate on anything except the horrifying possibility that my son was living with a killer. Margaret tried to distract me with photo albums and stories about the old days, but every few minutes my mind would return to Robert. Was he safe? Did Amanda suspect that we were investigating her? How long did we have before she decided he had outlived his usefulness? Charles returned late that evening carrying a box of files and wearing the grim expression of a man who had seen his worst suspicions confirmed. Tell me, I said, before he even had his coat off. Let's sit down first. Margaret made coffee while Charles spread the files across the dining room table. Crime scene photos, witness statements, financial records, all the evidence that Detective Morrison had been quietly gathering for years. Harold Mackenzie, Charles said, pointing to a photograph of a distinguished-looking man in his 70s. Retired accountant, widower, lived alone in a house worth over $1 million. He hired Amanda as a companion in March of 2019. I studied the photo. Harold Mackenzie had kind eyes and a gentle smile, the face of someone who had probably never hurt anyone in his life. What happened to him? According to Amanda, Harold had been depressed about his wife's death. She said he had been talking about suicide, feeling like he had nothing left to live for. On June 15, 2019, she found him dead in his garage with the car engine running. Carbon monoxide poisoning? That was the ruling. But Morrison found several problems with her story. First, Harold had made plans for the following week: a doctor's appointment, a lunch date with his brother. Second, the garage door was found open when the paramedics arrived, which would have prevented a fatal buildup of carbon monoxide. Charles pulled out another file. Most importantly, Harold had changed his will 2 weeks before his death, leaving his entire estate to Amanda. The pattern was becoming sickeningly clear. How much? $1.2 million. I felt dizzy. And the police didn't find this suspicious? They did. But Amanda had an alibi. She was supposedly at the grocery store when Harold died. She had receipts time-stamped during the estimated time of death. But Morrison didn't believe it. Morrison discovered that the timestamps on store receipts could be manipulated if you knew the right people. Amanda had a friend who worked at the grocery store where she claimed to be shopping. Charles opened another file, this one containing photos of a younger man. David Peterson, age 42, marketing executive, divorced, lived alone in a condo downtown. This was the man Amanda had been photographed with just 6 weeks ago. the one she had called her amazing fiancé on social media. Amanda met David at a charity fundraiser in January. By March, they were living together. By April, she had convinced him to make her the beneficiary of his life insurance policy. My stomach turned. How much? $500,000. And then he conveniently drove his car into Miller's Creek. The sheriff's department ruled it suicide. David had been struggling with depression since his divorce, had been drinking heavily, was having financial problems. Financial problems that started after he met Amanda? Charles nodded grimly. David's bank records show large cash withdrawals starting in February. His credit cards were maxed out by April. He had taken out a personal loan against his condo. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Amanda would target vulnerable men, move in quickly, gain their trust and access to their finances, then systematically drain their resources while positioning herself to benefit from their deaths. But Charles, if she killed David 3 weeks ago, why is she still with Robert? Wouldn't she want to disappear? That's what worried me the most. I think she's not done with Robert yet. He's not dead, which means she still needs something from him. Charles pulled out the last file, and my heart nearly stopped. It contained surveillance photos of Amanda, taken recently, but these weren't social media posts. These were professional surveillance photos, the kind police take during an investigation. Morrison has been tracking her movements since she left Phoenix. These were taken last week. The photos showed Amanda at various locations around our town, at the bank where Robert worked, at a real estate office, at a lawyer's office downtown. What was she doing at these places? I made some calls today. The real estate office. She's been inquiring about property values in Robert's neighborhood. The lawyer's office. She made an appointment to discuss estate planning. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. She's preparing. I think so. And Linda, there's something else. Morrison showed me the timeline of her previous relationships. In every case, the victim died within 6 to 8 months of meeting her. I counted backward in my mind. Robert has been with her for 8 months, which means we're running out of time. That night, I lay awake in Margaret's guest room, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what to do next. We had evidence that Amanda was dangerous, but nothing concrete enough to take to the police. We had suspicions about her past, but no proof that would hold up in court. And meanwhile, Robert was alone with her, completely unaware that the woman carrying his child might be planning to kill him. The next morning brought the phone call I had been dreading. Linda? Robert's voice sounded strange, strained and frightened. Something's happened. I need to see you. My heart raced. What's wrong? I can't talk about it over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? Somewhere Amanda won't know about? I looked at Charles, who had been listening to the conversation. He nodded and wrote something on a piece of paper. Meet me at Rosie's Diner on Highway 9 in an hour. Okay. And Mom, don't tell anyone you're meeting me, please. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in terror. What had happened? Had Amanda done something to Robert? Or worse, had she discovered that we were investigating her? Charles insisted on coming with me, but he agreed to stay in the car so Robert wouldn't feel ambushed. I arrived at Rosie's 10 minutes early and sat in a corner booth, watching the door and trying to calm my racing heart. When Robert walked in, I barely recognized him. My confident, successful son looked haggard and frightened. He had lost weight. His clothes hung loosely on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant stress. Mom, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. His hands were shaking. Robert, what's wrong? You look terrible. He laughed, but it was a broken sound. I feel terrible. Mom, I think I'm losing my mind. What do you mean? It's Amanda. Things have been happening. Strange things. And I'm starting to wonder if... He stopped, shaking his head. No, this is crazy. I can't be thinking what I'm thinking. I reached across the table and took his hands in mine. They were ice cold and trembling. Tell me what's happening. Robert looked around the diner nervously, as if he expected Amanda to materialize from thin air. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Remember David Peterson? Amanda's ex-boyfriend? My blood went cold, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. She mentioned him a few times. He died last month. Car accident. Amanda was really upset about it. said it brought up memories of her father's death. I waited, letting him tell the story at his own pace. But Mom, I found something in Amanda's things. Photos of David taken after they were supposed to have broken up. Recent photos. And there was a key to his apartment. The diner suddenly felt too warm. What kind of photos? Intimate photos. Photos that looked like they were taken the week before he died. Robert's voice broke slightly. Mom, I think Amanda was still seeing David when he died. I think she's been lying to me about everything. This was it. The opening I had been hoping for. Robert was starting to see through Amanda's lies on his own. What else have you found? Money problems that don't make sense. We're supposed to be saving for the baby, but somehow we're always broke. She says it's because of the pregnancy expenses, but I've seen the bank statements. There are cash withdrawals I don't remember making. How much money? Thousands of dollars over the past few months. And she's been talking about life insurance a lot lately. Asking about my policy at work, suggesting I increase the coverage. Every word he spoke confirmed Charles's worst suspicions. Amanda was following the same pattern she had used with her previous victims: financial manipulation, isolation, and preparation for their deaths. Robert, there's something I need to tell you. I started carefully, telling him about Charles's investigation, about Amanda's history in Phoenix, about the pattern of deaths that seemed to follow her wherever she went. With each revelation, Robert's face grew paler. You're saying she's killed people? We think it's possible. And Robert, we're worried about you. But she's pregnant with my baby. Are you sure about that? The question hung in the air between us. Robert stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him connecting dots he had been afraid to connect on his own. She won't let me come to the doctor's appointments, he said slowly. Says she wants to handle all the medical stuff herself. I haven't even seen an ultrasound photo. My heart broke for him. Even Amanda's pregnancy might be another lie, another way to control him. Robert, I think you're in danger. I think you need to get away from her as soon as possible. I can't just leave. If she really is pregnant, then we'll figure that out later. But right now, your safety is more important than anything else. Robert sat in silence for several minutes, staring at his coffee cup. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything. For the way I treated you after the robbery. For the things I said. She convinced me that you were trying to control my life. That you couldn't accept that I was building a future with someone else. I know, sweetheart. That's what people like Amanda do. They turn their victims against anyone who might see through their lies. I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. You're a victim. And right now, we need to focus on keeping you alive long enough to get you away from her. Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. What should I do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but the words made my blood freeze. I know where you are. Come home now, or Robert pays the price. I showed the message to Robert and watched the color drain completely from his face. She knows, he whispered. She knows we're here together. I looked toward the parking lot and saw Charles getting out of his car, his face alert with the expression of a cop who senses danger. He had probably been watching the entrances, looking for any sign that we had been followed. But it was too late. Amanda had found us. The question now was, what was she prepared to do about it? Charles reached our table just as Robert's phone started ringing. Amanda's name flashed on the screen, and we all stared at it like it was a bomb about to explode. Don't answer it, Charles said quietly, sliding into the booth beside me. We need to think about this carefully. But the phone kept ringing, and then it stopped, and immediately started ringing again. Amanda wasn't going to give up. She'll keep calling, Robert said, his voice hollow. And if I don't answer, she'll. God knows what she'll do. What could she do? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. She has keys to my house, to my car. She has access to my bank accounts. She knows where I work, who my friends are. Robert's voice was getting more panicked. She's been in control of every aspect of my life for months. I don't even know how to function without her permission anymore. Charles leaned forward, his cop instincts taking over. Robert, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Based on what your mother and I have discovered, Amanda may be responsible for the deaths of at least 3 people, possibly more. Robert's phone buzzed with another text. This one he read aloud. If you don't come home in the next hour, I'm calling your boss to tell him about the money you've been stealing from client accounts. But I haven't been stealing anything, Robert said desperately. It doesn't matter, Charles replied grimly. If she's been manipulating your bank accounts, she could have created evidence that would make it look like you have. She could destroy your career, your reputation, everything you've built. The sophistication of Amanda's manipulation was breathtaking. She hadn't just isolated Robert emotionally, she had positioned herself to destroy him professionally and financially if he ever tried to leave. There's more, Robert said, showing us another text. Remember, I'm carrying your baby. If something happens to me because you abandoned us, it's your fault. Even if the pregnancy was fake, she was using the possibility of it as emotional blackmail. Every angle covered, every escape route blocked. We need to go to the police, I said. Charles shook his head. With what evidence? Suspicious deaths in another state that were all ruled accidental or suicide? A pattern of behavior that could be explained as coincidence? They'd take a report and tell us to call if anything actually happened. So what do? We confront her, Charles said. But we do it smart. We go to Robert's house together, we record the conversation, and we see if we can get her to admit to something incriminating. That's insane, I protested. If she's as dangerous as you think she is, then we're the only chance Robert has. If we go to the police with suspicions, they'll investigate for weeks while Amanda has time to hurt Robert and disappear. If we confront her now, while she thinks she's in control, she might slip up. Robert's phone rang again. This time he answered it. Amanda, I'm on my way home. Her voice was loud enough for us to hear clearly. You better be, Robert. And if you've been talking to that pathetic mother of yours, we're going to have a very serious conversation about loyalty. The line went dead. She knows, Robert said. She knows I've been talking to you. How? I asked. Charles was already standing up, his expression alert. Because she's been watching us. Probably following us for days. Then why didn't she stop us sooner? Because she wanted to know what we knew first. She wanted to see how much of a threat we actually posed. Charles threw some money on the table. We need to go. Now. As we walked to the parking lot, Charles explained his plan. He would wire Robert with a recording device and stay outside the house, monitoring the conversation. Robert would go inside and try to get Amanda to admit to her crimes while I stayed safely away. Absolutely not, I said. I'm not sending my son in there alone to face a killer. Mom, he's right. This might be my only chance to get my life back. Or it might be your chance to get yourself killed. Charles stopped walking and turned to face both of us. Linda, I've been a cop for 35 years. I've dealt with people like Amanda before. The one advantage we have right now is that she still thinks she's in control. She thinks she can intimidate Robert into compliance and make this whole problem go away. What if she can't? Then she'll try to run, which gives us time to warn the authorities in other cities. But if she feels cornered with no way out, he didn't need to finish the sentence. There's another option, Robert said quietly. I could just disappear. Leave town, start over somewhere else. And spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder? Charles shook his head. Amanda has already shown she's willing to track people across state lines. And if she really is pregnant with your child, she'll use that to find you no matter where you go. We drove to Charles's house in tense silence. Margaret helped Charles set up the recording equipment while I sat with Robert, watching him transform back into the scared little boy I remembered from his childhood. I don't know if I can do this, he said. You're stronger than you think. You figured out that something was wrong, even with all her manipulation. That takes courage. I should have figured it out months ago. I should have seen through her lies. People like Amanda are experts at deception. They spend their lives learning how to manipulate others. It's not your fault that you trusted someone you thought you loved. Charles finished setting up the equipment and tested the recording device. The plan was simple. Robert would go home and act as if everything was normal. He would apologize for meeting with me, claim that he had told me to leave him alone, and try to get Amanda to talk about her past relationships. If she starts to get suspicious, get out of the house immediately, Charles instructed. Don't try to be a hero, just run. What if she doesn't let me leave? Then I'll be right outside. At the first sign of trouble, I'm calling for backup and coming in. We drove to Robert's neighborhood in separate cars. Charles parked down the street where he could see the house but wouldn't be noticed. I was supposed to go back to Margaret's and wait, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Instead, I parked around the corner and waited, my heart pounding as I watched Robert walk up to his own front door like he was walking to his execution. The house looked normal from the outside. Well-maintained lawn, expensive cars in the driveway, the picture of suburban success. But I knew that inside was a woman who had potentially killed multiple people and was now holding my son prisoner in his own life. Robert's voice came through clearly on the radio Charles had given me to monitor the conversation. Amanda, I'm home. You're late. Her voice was cold, controlled. Where have you been? I went to see my mother. I told you not to contact her. I know, but she called me crying about the robbery. I felt bad for her. There was a pause. When Amanda spoke again, her tone had changed slightly. Softer, more manipulative. Oh, Robert, you have such a good heart. But your mother is trying to cause problems between us. She can't accept that you're starting a new family. I know. I told her that. What exactly did you tell her? That I chose you over her? That she needs to stop trying to interfere in our relationship? Another pause. I could picture Amanda calculating, trying to decide whether to believe him. Did she say anything about me specifically? This was the moment. If Robert could get Amanda to reveal something incriminating about her past, we might have enough evidence to go to the police. She asked about your previous relationships. She seemed to think you were hiding something. Amanda's laugh was sharp, artificial. What could I possibly be hiding? I've told you everything about my past. She mentioned someone named David Peterson. The silence that followed was deafening. When Amanda spoke again, her voice was completely different, harder, more dangerous. What did she say about David? Just that he died recently. She thought it was strange that you didn't mention it. David was a mistake. A relationship that ended badly. His death has nothing to do with us. But you were still seeing him, weren't you? Even after we started dating. Another long silence. Through the radio, I could hear what sounded like footsteps pacing across the floor. Robert, who have you been talking to besides your mother? No one. Why? Because normal people don't ask these kinds of questions. Normal people don't investigate their girlfriend's past relationships. The temperature in her voice was dropping with each word. I could sense the conversation spiraling toward danger. I wasn't investigating anything. I just wondered why you never mentioned that someone you used to date had died. People die, Robert. It's not my responsibility to provide you with obituaries of everyone I've ever known. What about Harold Mackenzie? My blood went cold. That name hadn't been part of the plan. Robert was improvising, and I could hear the fear in his voice as he spoke. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. When Amanda finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than if she had been shouting. Where did you hear that name? Someone mentioned. Who mentioned it, Robert? Who have you been talking to? Through the radio, I could hear sounds of movement, like someone was walking closer to the microphone. Was it that old man who's been asking questions around town? The one who claims to be your mother's friend? Charles and I exchanged panicked looks through our car windows. She knew about Charles. She had been watching us more carefully than we realized. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Robert. I hate being lied to. There was a sound that might have been a drawer being opened, followed by what sounded like metal hitting wood. Amanda, what are you doing? I'm protecting us, Robert. I'm protecting our future together. What do you mean? Harold Mackenzie was a lonely old man who fell in love with me. When he realized I didn't feel the same way about him, he became obsessed. He started threatening to hurt himself if I left him. So you stayed with him? I tried to help him, but some people can't be helped. Some people are too broken to save. And David, another pause, the sound of footsteps moving closer to the microphone. David was weak. He couldn't handle the pressure of adult responsibilities. When he realized he couldn't give me the life I deserved, he chose the coward's way out. by driving his car into Miller's Creek, by giving up instead of fighting for what mattered. The way she was talking about these deaths, with such clinical detachment, made my skin crawl, but she hadn't actually confessed to anything yet. Amanda, are you saying they killed themselves? I'm saying that some people aren't strong enough to handle real life, but you're different, Robert. You're stronger than they were. What if I'm not? What if I disappoint you like they did? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. When Amanda answered, her voice carried a chill that went straight through me. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Through the radio, I could hear Charles muttering what sounded like prayers under his breath. The conversation had taken a turn that none of us had anticipated. Amanda, I need to ask you something. What? Are you really pregnant? The silence that followed was absolute. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. It was as if the entire world had stopped breathing. When Amanda finally spoke, her voice was completely different from anything we had heard before. It was the voice of someone who had just been pushed too far. Who told you to ask me that question? No one. I've never seen any doctor's reports, any ultrasound pictures. You don't trust me. It's not that. I just want to be involved in the pregnancy. I want to know about the baby. There is no baby, Robert. The words hit like a physical blow. Even though we had suspected it, hearing her admit it so coldly was devastating. What do you mean? I mean, I lied. There is no baby. There never was a baby. I needed time to secure our relationship, and pregnancy was the easiest way to ensure you wouldn't leave me. Through the radio, I could hear Robert's breathing becoming rapid and shallow. He was having a panic attack. You lied about being pregnant? I lied about a lot of things, Robert, but that doesn't matter now. What do you mean it doesn't matter? I mean, we've reached the bridge I mentioned earlier. There was a sound that made my blood freeze, the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. Amanda, what are you doing? I'm solving a problem before it gets out of hand. Charles was already out of his car, running toward the house. I could see him speaking rapidly into his phone, probably calling for backup, but I knew it would be too late. Amanda, please, we can work this out. No, Robert, we can't. You know too much, and you've involved too many other people. This was supposed to be simple, but you had to go running to Mommy. I won't tell anyone. I promise. Of course you won't. The last thing we heard through the radio before the transmission cut off was Amanda's voice, cold and final. Because dead men don't tell tales. The silence from the radio was deafening. I sat frozen in my car, staring at the device that had just broadcast what might have been my son's final moments. Charles was already halfway to the house, his phone pressed to his ear as he called for police backup. I should have stayed in the car. I should have waited for the professionals, but that was my son in there. And I had already lost too much time being the kind of mother who waited for others to solve her problems. I got out of my car and ran. Charles reached the front door first, but it was locked. He was preparing to kick it down when I caught up with him. The spare key, I said breathlessly. Robert keeps it under the planter by the garage. As Charles retrieved the key, we could hear voices from inside the house. Amanda's sharp and commanding, Robert's pleading and terrified. Please, Amanda, you don't have to do this. We can figure something out. The time for figuring things out is over, Robert. You made your choice when you decided to betray me. Charles unlocked the door as quietly as possible, and we slipped inside. The house I had visited so many times looked different now, darker, more sinister. The expensive furniture and perfect decor that Amanda had insisted on suddenly seemed like props in a stage play, hiding the true nature of what was happening inside. We followed the voices to the living room, where we found them. Robert was sitting on the couch, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Amanda stood 6 feet away, pointing a small silver pistol directly at his chest. She looked nothing like the polished, manipulative woman I had come to know over the past 8 months. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and there was something wild and desperate in her eyes that spoke of someone who knew their carefully constructed world was falling apart. Amanda, Charles said quietly, stepping into the room with his hands visible. My name is Charles Morrison. I'm a retired police lieutenant, and I think we need to talk. She spun toward him, the gun never wavering. "You're the one who's been asking questions about me." "Yes, I am. You couldn't just mind your own business, could you? You had to go digging into things that don't concern you. Actually, they do concern me. You see, I made a promise to Robert's father before he died that I would protect his family. That includes protecting Robert from people who want to hurt him." Amanda's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Protect him? From what? From having a woman who loves him? Is that what you call this?" Charles gestured toward the gun. "Love? This is necessity. Robert has forced me into this position by involving people who don't understand our relationship." I stepped out from behind Charles, and Amanda's eyes widened with recognition and fury. "You!" she hissed. "This is all your fault. You couldn't just accept that Robert had moved on with his life." "You're right," I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "I couldn't accept it, because the Robert I raised would never abandon his mother after she was robbed and left with nothing. The Robert you raised was weak and codependent. I made him stronger. You made him isolated and afraid. I made him successful. I gave him direction, purpose, a future worth having. By lying to him about everything, by pretending to be pregnant, by stealing his money." Amanda's grip on the gun tightened. "I never stole anything. Everything Robert gave me was freely given. What about Harold Mackenzie's money? What about David Peterson's life insurance?" For the first time, Amanda looked genuinely rattled. "You don't know anything about those men. I know they trusted you and they died for it. They died because they were weak, because they couldn't handle the truth about what real love requires." Charles took a small step closer. "What does real love require, Amanda? Sacrifice, commitment, the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect your future together. Including murder? Including whatever is necessary." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Amanda had as good as confessed to killing at least 2 people, possibly more. "And what about Robert?" I asked. "Does your love for him require his death too?" Amanda looked at my son, and for a moment, something that might have been genuine emotion flickered across her face. I didn't want it to come to this. But Robert made his choice when he decided to betray me, when he decided that his pathetic family was more important than our future together. "I never betrayed you," Robert said desperately. "I love you. I want to be with you." "No, you don't. If you loved me, you would have trusted me. You wouldn't have gone running to Mommy the first time you had questions about our relationship." Charles took another step forward. "Amanda, you're surrounded. I've already called for backup and they'll be here any minute. This can end peacefully if you put the gun down now." "Peacefully?" Amanda's voice rose to nearly a shriek. "There's nothing peaceful about spending the rest of my life in prison for crimes I committed out of love. You didn't commit them out of love. You committed them for money. Money was just a means to an end. Everything I did was to build a future where I could be safe, where I could be happy, where I wouldn't have to depend on anyone else ever again." The raw honesty in her voice was chilling. This wasn't about love or even greed. This was about a woman so damaged by whatever had happened to her in the past that she saw other human beings as nothing more than resources to be consumed. "What happened to you?" I asked quietly. "What made you this way?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but the gun never wavered. "You wouldn't understand. People like you, with your perfect families and your unconditional love, you can't understand what it's like to grow up knowing that everyone who's supposed to care about you is just waiting for an excuse to throw you away. So you decided to throw them away first?" "I decided to take control of my own life instead of waiting for other people to decide my fate." In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Amanda heard them too, and her desperation was becoming more obvious by the second. "It's over, Amanda," Charles said. "Let Robert go. This doesn't have to end with anyone else getting hurt." "You're wrong. This has to end with someone getting hurt. The question is who?" She turned the gun toward me. "It should be you. None of this would have happened if you had just accepted that Robert had moved on." "No," Robert said, standing up despite the weapon pointed at him. "If you're going to shoot someone, shoot me. My mother has been through enough because of my mistakes. Your mother has been through enough because she couldn't mind her own business. She was trying to protect me because she loves me, something you've never understood." Amanda's face twisted with rage. "I loved you more than anyone has ever loved anyone. I gave up everything for you. You gave up nothing. You used me, just like you used Harold Mackenzie and David Peterson, and God knows how many others." "They were all practice," Amanda said, her voice suddenly calm again. "Learning experiences. You were supposed to be different. You were supposed to be the one who finally understood what I needed. What you needed was help, professional help, not another victim." "I'm not the victim here," Amanda screamed. "I'm the survivor. I'm the one who figured out how to take what I needed instead of waiting for someone else to give it to me." The sirens were getting closer. Charles was slowly reaching for something in his jacket. Probably his own gun, though I hadn't seen him carry one in years. "Amanda," I said, trying to keep her attention on me instead of Charles. "You said you grew up without unconditional love, but you've had that with Robert. He loved you even when you were lying to him, stealing from him, manipulating him. Even now, when you're pointing a gun at him, he still wants to protect you. Isn't that the kind of love you were looking for?" She stared at me for a moment, and I thought I saw a flicker of something human in her eyes. "It's too late," she said finally. "I've done too much, gone too far. There's no coming back from what I am. There's always a chance to choose differently. Not for me." The first police car pulled into the driveway, its lights flashing through the front windows. Amanda looked toward the door, then back at Robert, then at me. "I want you to know," she said to Robert, "that I did love you, in my own way, more than I've ever loved anyone." "I know," Robert said quietly, "and I'm sorry that wasn't enough to save you." Amanda smiled then, and for a moment she looked like the woman Robert had fallen in love with. Beautiful, vulnerable, almost innocent. "It was never about being saved," she said. "It was about not being thrown away." She turned the gun away from all of us and pointed it at herself. "Amanda, no." Robert lunged forward, but Charles caught him and held him back. The shot echoed through the house like thunder. Amanda crumpled to the floor, the gun clattering across the hardwood. Charles immediately knelt beside her, checking for a pulse while I pulled Robert into my arms. "Is she?" Robert couldn't finish the question. "She's alive," Charles said grimly, "but we need paramedics immediately." The next few hours passed in a blur of police questions, ambulances, and reporters gathering outside the house. Amanda was rushed to the hospital with a gunshot wound to her shoulder. Apparently, she had flinched at the last moment, saving her own life without meaning to. Robert and I gave our statements separately, then together, telling the whole story from the robbery to the confrontation. The recording device Charles had given Robert had captured most of the conversation, including Amanda's admission that she had lied about the pregnancy and her implied confessions about Harold Mackenzie and David Peterson. Detective Sarah Williams, who was leading the investigation, told us that they would be reopening several cases in multiple states based on what they had learned about Amanda's history. "This is going to take months to sort out," she said. "But based on what we've heard today, we're looking at charges for fraud, attempted murder, and possibly several counts of homicide." 3 weeks later, I was finally able to move out of the motel and back into my house. The insurance had covered most of my losses from the robbery, and Robert had insisted on paying for new furniture to replace what couldn't be recovered. "I owe you more than furniture," he said as we arranged the new living room set. "I owe you an apology that I'll probably spend the rest of my life trying to make. You don't owe me anything except the promise that you'll never let anyone make you feel like you have to choose between family and love again." Robert was quiet for a moment, arranging throw pillows with the kind of care that suggested he was thinking about more than home decor. "I keep wondering what would have happened if you hadn't called Charles. If I had just accepted what Amanda told me and never asked any questions." "You would have asked questions eventually. That's who you are, Robert. Amanda couldn't change that forever. She came close, but she didn't succeed, and that's what matters." Charles stopped by later that evening with news about the ongoing investigation. Amanda had been charged with multiple counts of fraud and attempted murder. The authorities in Phoenix had enough evidence to charge her with Harold Mackenzie's murder, and they were building a case against her for David Peterson's death as well. She's looking at life in prison without parole, Charles told us. Detective Morrison says there might be other victims they haven't identified yet. How many people do you think she killed? Robert asked. Probably more than we'll ever know, Charles replied grimly. People like Amanda don't usually start with murder. They work their way up to it over years of smaller crimes. What happens now? I asked. Now you rebuild your lives. You remember what it feels like to be a real family, instead of people being manipulated by someone who saw you as targets instead of human beings. That night, after Charles left and Robert went home to his empty house, I sat in my restored living room and thought about everything that had happened. 6 months ago, I had been a lonely widow, struggling to maintain a relationship with a son who seemed to be drifting away from me. I had blamed myself for the distance, wondered what I had done wrong, questioned whether I was becoming the kind of needy parent who drove their children away. Now I understood that none of it had been about me. Amanda had systematically destroyed my relationship with Robert, not because of anything I had done, but because she recognized that I represented a threat to her control over him. The cruelest part was that she had been right to see me as a threat, not because I wanted to interfere in Robert's life, but because I loved him unconditionally. And unconditional love, the kind that doesn't require performance or obedience or payment, was the one thing Amanda had never been able to understand or replicate. She had tried to replace it with manipulation, control, and dependency. But in the end, Robert's need for genuine love had been stronger than her ability to provide a convincing substitute. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Robert. "Mom? I'm sorry to call so late, but I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about something Amanda said." "What was that?" "She said that everything she did was so she wouldn't have to depend on anyone else ever again. But the thing is, she was depending on other people. She was just doing it through deception instead of trust. That's very insightful. I think I understand now why what she did was so wrong. It wasn't just that she lied or stole or hurt people. It was that she took away our ability to choose to care about her." Robert was quiet for a moment. If she had just been honest about her past, about her fears, about what she needed, maybe people would have helped her. Maybe she wouldn't have felt like she had to take what she needed. Maybe. But some people are too damaged to accept help when it's offered. Do you think she was born that way? Or do you think something made her that way? I considered the question carefully. I think something probably made her that way. But that doesn't excuse what she chose to do to other people. No, it doesn't. We talked for another hour, working through the complicated emotions of having been victimized by someone we had both, in different ways, cared about. When we finally said goodnight, I felt closer to my son than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by my own things. For the first time since Harold died, I felt truly safe and secure. Amanda had tried to erase me from my son's life, to make me irrelevant to his future. Instead, she had reminded both of us why family matters, why unconditional love is precious, and why some bonds can't be broken no matter how hard someone tries. She had thought she was protecting herself by eliminating threats to her control. But in the end, the very thing she had tried to destroy, the love between a mother and son, was what had saved us all. A year later, Robert and I were sitting on my front porch, watching my grandson Tommy play in the yard. Yes, I had a grandson, not with Amanda, but with Sarah, the kind and honest woman Robert had met in therapy as he worked through the trauma of his relationship with Amanda. Sarah was nothing like Amanda. She encouraged Robert's relationship with me, included me in their plans, and treated me like family from the beginning. Their son Tommy was 2 months old, and Robert was the kind of father I always knew he could be, present, loving, and unafraid to show vulnerability. "Do you ever wonder what Amanda's doing now?" Sarah asked, bouncing Tommy on her lap. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not in the way you might think. I don't wonder if she's sorry, or if she's learned anything, or if she's found redemption. I wonder if she's finally figured out that the thing she spent her whole life trying to take by force was something people would have given her freely if she had just asked." "Do you forgive her?" Robert asked. It was a question I had been wrestling with for months. I forgive her for being broken, I said finally. I forgive her for being so damaged that she couldn't recognize love when it was offered to her. But I don't forgive her for choosing to hurt innocent people instead of seeking help. That seems fair, Sarah said. As the sun set over our quiet neighborhood, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that terrible night when my house was robbed. I had thought that losing my possessions was the worst thing that could happen to me. I had no idea that I was about to lose my son as well, or that getting him back would require facing down a killer. But I had also discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed. I had learned that sometimes the people we love need us to be stronger than they can be for themselves. I had learned that real family doesn't just happen. It requires constant choice, constant effort, and constant willingness to fight for each other. Most importantly, I had learned that love, real, unconditional love, is the most powerful force in the world. It can't be manufactured, manipulated, or replaced with substitutes. It can only be given freely, received gratefully, and protected fiercely. Amanda had tried to steal that from Robert and me. She had failed, and in failing, she had reminded us both of exactly how precious it was.